Have you ever wondered if the woman you love isn't actually loving you, but slowly dismantling you, not by force, not by hatred, but through something far more dangerous, silent control wrapped in affection? This is the terrifying question most men never dare to ask until it's too late. You think you're building a relationship. You think you found passion. But beneath the surface, you're surrendering your sovereignty piece by piece, all while calling it love. Some women don't enter a relationship seeking connection, they seek domination. They don't consciously plot to destroy you. No, it's much more insidious. Their power lies in your blindness, in your hunger to believe, in your desperate need to be chosen. And by the time you recognize what's happening, you're already negotiating for peace you should have never had to earn. Niccolo Machiavelli saw this long before modern psychology had words for it. He understood that not all power is loud, that the most effective control doesn't scream, it whispers. Behind every tender moment may lie a carefully crafted balance of control and dependence. Today we're going to expose what most men avoid, the hidden psychological games that turn love into quiet captivity, and how you can escape not with anger, but with ruthless clarity. Stay until the end, because once you see this, you will never look at love the same way again. Most men walk into love with their hearts wide open and their eyes completely shut. They believe love is pure, innocent, unconditional. They believe that if they give enough sacrifice, enough love, enough, everything will work itself out. But Machiavelli, he never fell for that illusion. Because Machiavelli understood one brutal truth most men are too scared to face in every human relationship. Power is always in play, especially in love. He wasn't a hopeless romantic. He was a strategist, an observer of people, a master of studying what hides behind smiles, behind soft words, behind passion. He knew that where there is desire, there is also leverage. Where there is attachment, there is also control. And where there is love, there can be quiet warfare. Most men today have been conditioned to see women only as emotional beings driven purely by love and vulnerability. But some women, whether consciously or unconsciously, have mastered something far more dangerous, the art of subtle domination. Not through aggression, not through obvious manipulation, but through perfectly orchestrated ambiguity, controlled vulnerability, emotional instability disguised as passion, and the man he doesn't even realize he's entering a battlefield. He calls it love. But what he's actually doing is surrendering his kingdom brick by brick. Machiavelli would call this soft conquest, the most dangerous kind of conquest. Because unlike war, where you see the enemy coming in love, you never see the invasion happen. You open the gates yourself. You let her in. You hand over control. And you feel grateful for it. That's how dangerous this game is. Behind every glance filled with desire, behind every touch that makes your heart race, there may be a deeper game unfolding, a game where your emotional stability becomes her leverage, where your devotion becomes her currency, where your willingness to give becomes the very tool that chains you to her control. And here's where most men lose. They think they're being noble. They think they're being real men for sacrificing their needs, their boundaries, their identities, all in the name of love. But Machiavelli would warn them, the one who surrenders first in love often loses everything, including himself. This is not a message of hatred toward women. This is a wake-up call for men. Because the most dangerous enemy isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's simply powerful. And anything powerful, if you're not prepared for it, can crush you. Not because it wants to, but because you allowed it. Today we're pulling back the curtain. We're exposing the invisible battlefield you're already standing on. And once you see it, you will never be conquered again. Control never arrives dressed like control. It walks in wearing the costume of love. And that's exactly why most men don't see it. At first everything feels electric. She's passionate, intense, alive. The highs are intoxicating. The connection feels powerful. But hidden beneath that passion is a system, a carefully designed mechanism that slowly pulls you into emotional captivity without you realizing it. The first layer of this system is emotional instability disguised as love's depth. Small conflicts arise, disagreements over tiny, meaningless things. A misunderstood text, a delayed reply, a minor comment taken the wrong way. And then, after the storm comes the peace. She forgives, she calms, she offers warmth. And you feel grateful, you feel safe again. What you don't realize is that she's creating the very storms you're now addicted to escaping. She destabilizes you only to become the one who soothes you. You aren't falling in love with her. You're becoming addicted to the relief she offers after the chaos she created. And that cycle, it's not accidental. It's design. Then comes the second layer, controlled ambiguity. One moment she's fully present, her eyes locked on yours, making you feel like you're the only man in her universe. The next, she withdraws. She goes cold, distant, silent. And you start questioning yourself. Was it something you said? Something you didn't do? You begin chasing answers, chasing her attention, thinking, if I can just get it right, she'll stay. But every time you move closer, she steps back just enough to keep you pursuing. This isn't love. This is emotional chess. And you're already several moves behind. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. It's a classic tactic of power. Keep your opponent uncertain, unbalanced, always doubting himself, and you maintain control without ever needing to raise your voice. The dangerous woman doesn't dominate you through aggression. She controls you by weaponizing your own desire for her approval. What makes this trap so effective is your own ego. You tell yourself you're fighting for love when in reality, you're negotiating your dignity. You don't even realize how far you've drifted from your center. You no longer recognize the man you've become. The worst part, you still believe you're being noble, sacrificing for love. But Machiavelli would say, he who negotiates for love has already lost the war. And most men, they don't even know they're at war. But after today, you will. This is where the game becomes deadly, because by now, you're emotionally invested. And that's exactly when she introduces her most dangerous weapon, the mirror of your fantasies. She doesn't need to control you directly. She simply becomes what you crave most. She studies you. She watches what excites you, what draws you in, what makes your eyes light up. And then she transforms into that woman. Not because she's lying, not because she's evil, but because she's a master of adaptation. You want softness. She becomes gentle. You desire strength. She radiates confidence. You're drawn to wounded souls you think you can fix. Suddenly, her vulnerability bleeds through at all the right moments. You believe you're the only one who truly understands her, the only man who sees her pain and can save her from it. But in reality, you're not connecting with who she really is. You're connecting with your own projections perfectly reflected back at you. This is not love. This is seduction at the psychological level. Because the deeper you invest in the fantasy, the harder it becomes to leave. You're not just attached to her anymore. You're attached to the image of the man you believe you are with her. The rescuer, the exception, the one who can finally succeed where others failed. And as you pour more energy, more time, more identity into this illusion, the foundation beneath you quietly disappears. Machiavelli would call this voluntary captivity. You're not forced into submission, you walk in willingly, even proudly. And that's why it's almost impossible for most men to see the trap before it's too late. You become addicted not to her, but to the role she allows you to play. And as long as you keep playing, she holds the power effortlessly. And when her true personality slowly starts to surface, when the act slips, you're already too far in. You've invested too much. You justify the red flags. You explain away the contradictions. You tell yourself it's just a rough patch, but deep down, you know something's wrong. You feel the anxiety, the confusion, the dissonance, yet you stay. Because walking away would mean admitting the brutal truth you've built your identity around an illusion. Machiavelli would warn you, the fortress that falls is not breached from outside, it crumbles from within. That's exactly what's happening to you. And unless you see it, unless you reclaim your clarity, you will continue to sacrifice yourself to a fantasy that was never real. And now you begin to lose your center. Slowly, quietly, subtly. You don't even notice it happening. One compromise here, one small sacrifice there. At first it feels like love, like devotion, like being a good man. You stop seeing your friends as much she needs more of your time. You let go of your passions. She doesn't really like those hobbies. You adjust your opinions because you don't want to trigger another disagreement. And piece by piece, you start erasing yourself. But here's the most dangerous part: you believe you're doing the right thing. You call it sacrifice. You call it maturity. You tell yourself, this is what strong relationships require. You don't realize that every time you suppress your truth to keep her happy, you're moving 1 inch further from who you are. And one day, you wake up and you barely recognize the man in the mirror. Machiavelli understood this better than most modern men do. He knew that the first step toward domination is always self-abandonment. The moment you start negotiating your identity to keep someone, you've already surrendered the throne. You're no longer leading the relationship, you're following invisible rules that you never agreed to, but now feel trapped inside. You become hyper-aware of her moods, reading every shift in her tone, every change in her facial expression, like you're decoding a secret language to avoid conflict. You lose your inner stability. Your emotional state becomes reactive, dependent entirely on how she feels that day. If she's warm, you feel peace. If she's distant, you spiral into anxiety. You no longer own your emotions. She does. This is not love. This is emotional slavery. And the worst part, the more you feel yourself slipping, the harder you try to fix it. You double down on your efforts. You try to be even more perfect, more understanding, more available, believing that if you just do a little more, things will return to the way they were at the start. But that beginning, it was never real. It was bait. You're now addicted to chasing something that was designed to vanish the moment you became hooked. Machiavelli would call this silent submission disguised as love. You don't even realize you've become a servant to a fantasy, constantly sacrificing your authenticity for temporary moments of peace. And as long as you keep surrendering, you'll keep losing until there's nothing left of you but a hollow version of the man you once were. But this loss of self isn't the end. It's the turning point. Because if you can recognize how far you've drifted, you can still reclaim your power. And that's exactly where we're going next. Here's where most men break. Because the truth is not easy to swallow. The woman may have used the strategies. She may have pulled the strings. She may have tested your weaknesses. But she wasn't your true captor. You were. You didn't fall because she pushed you. You fell because you willingly gave away your power in exchange for a fantasy that fed your ego. That's the part most men refuse to face. It wasn't her manipulation that trapped you. It was your hunger, your need to feel chosen, your desperation to be the exception. You wanted to be the one man who could heal her, save her, rescue her from her wounds. And in chasing that role, you abandoned your own clarity. Machiavelli would call this the internal betrayal. Because long before any woman ever gains control over a man, he first betrays himself. The dangerous woman simply exploits what's already broken inside you. She doesn't create the void, she just fills it temporarily. And the more you need her to fill it, the more you surrender to her. You convinced yourself that sacrificing your needs was love, that suppressing your voice was noble, That enduring emotional instability was proof of strength, but love that demands the death of your self-respect is not love. It's a transaction you can never win. The brutal truth is this: it was never about her. It was always about you, your unhealed wounds, your unresolved traumas, your silent fears. You wanted her to complete you, to validate you, to prove you were worthy. And in doing so, you handed her full control willingly. This is why so many men repeat the same cycle with different women. Because the real problem isn't out there, it's within. Until you face your inner void, you will always attract relationships that mirror your weaknesses. The partner may change. The patterns won't. You are not addicted to her. You are addicted to the version of yourself that she allowed you to become: the hero, the savior, the one who could finally fix someone else because deep down, you never learned how to fix yourself. Machiavelli would warn, the man who seeks power in others remains forever powerless. The man who governs himself fears no one. This is not about blaming yourself to suffer. This is about taking back the one thing no one can give you: sovereignty over your own soul. Because only when you own your weaknesses can you finally rebuild your strength. And that's exactly what we're about to unlock next. Here's where most men step even deeper into the trap: the savior complex. This is the silent poison that destroys more men than any form of manipulation ever could. You see her pain, you see her wounds, you hear her stories of broken pasts, toxic exes, childhood trauma, and something inside you awakens. You don't just want her, you want to save her. To be the one man who finally heals her. The one man who never leaves. The one man strong enough to handle her darkness. At first, it feels heroic, masculine, noble. You believe you're different from the others who failed her. You believe your love, your patience, your sacrifice will be enough to finally fix her. But this is where you're already lost. Because while you're trying to heal her, you're slowly abandoning yourself. Machiavelli would call this strategic suicide, a man willingly sacrificing his own sovereignty, his own strength for a battle he can never win. Because here's the brutal truth: you cannot save anyone who doesn't want to be saved. You cannot heal someone who uses their pain as power. And many dangerous women have learned exactly how to turn their wounds into weapons. The more broken they appear, the more heroic you feel for staying, and the deeper you sink. Every time you forgive a betrayal because of her past pain, you compromise your boundaries. Every time you overlook disrespect because she's been through a lot, you shrink your worth. Every time you excuse manipulation as trauma responses, you erode your center. And eventually, you're no longer leading the relationship, you're managing her emotions like a full-time caretaker, bleeding your energy to keep her stable. This is not love. This is emotional codependency, disguised as loyalty. And the most dangerous part, you will justify all of it. You will convince yourself that love requires sacrifice, that real men endure storms, that your patience is proof of your strength. But in reality, every sacrifice you make feeds her control. Every piece of yourself you give up makes you more dependent. Every compromise you call love is another step deeper into emotional captivity. Machiavelli would warn, the man who attempts to rescue the unwilling invites his own destruction. And that's exactly what you're doing. You are not saving her, you're sacrificing yourself for a role she needs you to play. The savior complex is one of the most dangerous illusions a man can fall into. Because it doesn't feel like weakness, it feels like purpose. But purpose built on self-betrayal will always collapse. The only person you can truly save is yourself. And until you understand this, you will continue bleeding your strength into women who never wanted healing, only control. In the next phase, we'll break down how you finally reclaim your power and why most men never make it that far. By this point, most men have already lost themselves. But here's the truth. Losing yourself isn't the end, it's the starting point for awakening. The only difference between men who stay trapped and men who rise again is one thing: brutal clarity. The willingness to face the truth without flinching. And from that moment, the escape begins. But not with emotion, not with drama, not with anger, with strategy. Cold, calculated, Machiavellian. Step 1. Ruthless self-awareness. You must stop analyzing her words and start observing her patterns. Words are cheap. Patterns never lie. If you feel unstable, constantly confused, endlessly negotiating for peace, it's not love. It's emotional captivity. Love brings stability. Games bring chaos. Stop rationalizing her inconsistency as complexity. Start recognizing it as control. Step 2. Break the negotiation cycle. Every time you explain yourself, every time you justify your feelings, every time you try to fix the dynamic, you surrender more power. Love doesn't require negotiation for basic respect. The moment you start explaining your worth, you've already lost it. Machiavelli would say, "The man who explains himself too much governs nothing." Step 3. Rebuild your inner axis. Power doesn't begin by changing her, it begins by stabilizing yourself. Daily rituals of clarity become your foundation. Whether it's solitude, journaling, focused breathwork, or simple silence, you must return to your own mind. Even 15 minutes a day of pure self-ownership begins to rebuild your lost center. The man who governs himself becomes harder to manipulate because he no longer feeds on external validation. Step 4. Redefine love. You must rewrite the story you've told yourself about love. If you believe love is suffering, you will attract pain. If you believe love is drama, you will attract chaos. But when you decide that love is clarity, peace, and mutual respect, the dangerous women lose their grip. You no longer crave the roller coaster, you crave stability. And they can't sell you what you no longer want. Step 5. Execute the silent exit. This is where most men fail. They want closure. They want final conversations. They want emotional understanding. Stop. One warning. One decision. After that, cut everything. Block, delete, erase. Any door you leave open will become her way back in. And trust me, she will return. Not because she loves you, but because she hates losing control. The silent exit is not just for her, it's for you. To protect your mind, your emotions, and your sovereignty. Machiavelli understood. The greatest power is not in conquest, but in withdrawal. When you reclaim your power, you no longer need revenge. You no longer need closure. You simply walk away ungoverned, untouchable, free. And yet most men never make it to this stage because they still don't understand the final phase, how to turn their wound into their ultimate strength. And that's exactly what we'll unlock next. The pain you've experienced wasn't an accident. It wasn't just bad luck. It was a test. A brutal initiation into the parts of yourself you never wanted to face. Most men after escaping carry two options: bitterness or transformation. And this is where the real power lies. Because if you stop at bitterness, you've simply traded one prison for another. But if you transform that wound into wisdom, you become untouchable. Machiavelli would call this strategic alchemy, the ability to transmute weakness into power. What you've suffered revealed your gaps, your hunger for validation, your addiction to being needed, your fantasy of saving someone else to avoid fixing yourself. Don't run from those truths. Stare them down. Own them. Because once you do, they can no longer be used against you. Every late night you waited for her reply. Every argument you apologized for just to keep the peace. Every compromise you made to keep her close. These were lessons, not failures. They were showing you exactly where you lacked self-governance, where you abandoned your axis, where you surrendered your sovereignty, and now you reclaim it. But understand, this reclaiming power isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, it's silent, stable, internal. True masculine power doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it simply stands. And from that posture, the manipulative woman has no leverage. She can no longer mirror your emptiness because you no longer operate from emptiness. The most dangerous man in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who no longer fears being alone. The man who doesn't need her love to validate his worth. The man who walks away, not in rage, but in complete peace, because his world no longer depends on hers. You turn the pain into strength by changing your blueprint for love itself. From now on, love must meet your standard, not your wound. You no longer accept love that demands you bleed. You no longer confuse drama for passion. You no longer accept the illusion that pain equals depth. Instead, you demand clarity. You demand peace. You demand alignment with your own values. And when that becomes your standard, manipulative women can no longer enter your kingdom. Machiavelli would say, "He who governs his own nature becomes ungovernable by others." This is the man you must become, not bitter, not broken, but sovereign. The wound was the doorway. The lesson was the price. And now you walk forward as a man who will never trade his soul for illusion again. But there's one final truth. You must accept the ultimate rule of power in love. And that's exactly what we'll face next. Here is the final truth most men never learn, and because of that, they stay trapped for life. Real love never requires you to betray yourself. Read that again. Love that demands your silence, your surrender, your emotional slavery is not love. It's emotional warfare disguised as intimacy. The man who believes that sacrificing himself is proof of his devotion will always be a target for manipulation. Why? Because when you're willing to abandon your values just to keep someone, you signal that you have no boundaries, and power always flows to the one who needs less. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He who governs least of himself is governed entirely by others. Many men believe that love means endurance, enduring disrespect, enduring instability, enduring confusion. But love is not endurance. Love is alignment. Love is clarity. Love is peace. And any relationship that requires you to constantly question your worth is not a relationship, it's a trap. The dangerous woman doesn't have to control you directly. She simply allows you to destroy yourself, to give up your fire piece by piece while believing you're being loyal. That's the genius of soft power. You think you're choosing her, but in reality, you're abandoning yourself to hold on to an illusion. Here's the brutal question every man must face. If you must constantly fight for someone's love, is it love or is it captivity? If the price of staying is losing yourself, the cost is too high. Always. True masculine power is rooted in self-governance. You don't chase love. You don't force love. You don't negotiate for love. You attract it by becoming so grounded in who you are, so clear in your values, that only those who respect your axis can enter your life. This is where most men fail. They want both to hold the woman and to hold their identity. But with the wrong woman, you can't have both. You either keep your soul or you keep the illusion. And every time you choose the illusion, you step deeper into emotional slavery. Machiavelli would whisper, "The one who cannot walk away has already lost." Understand, this power is not the ability to control others, it's the ability to govern yourself even when your emotions scream otherwise. It's the discipline to leave when staying requires your self-betrayal. Love that is real strengthens you. Love that is real expands you. It brings peace to your mind, not chaos to your soul. If you don't find it, walk alone. Because the man who walks alone in clarity is always stronger than the man who stays in captivity for company. Now you know what most men never do. The question is, will you act on it? The most dangerous illusion a man can fall into is believing that love requires his self-betrayal. You were never born to sacrifice your identity for temporary validation. Real love never demands you to silence your voice, shrink your world, or walk on emotional eggshells. True strength isn't in enduring manipulation, it's in having the clarity to walk away from it. You don't save others by losing yourself. You don't fix broken people who don't want to heal. Your responsibility is to govern your own heart like a kingdom, protect your values, defend your peace, and only open your gates to those who honor your sovereignty. When you stop chasing women who test your boundaries, you begin attracting women who respect them. And when you no longer fear being alone, you become ungovernable not by her, not by society, not even by your own weaknesses. That's where your power begins.